I welcome you on here in this room. I have a pleasure and honor to kick off this year's Booster Conference. I've been here before, and I have very nice memories. So I'm really happy to be back. And I want to kick off the event with a story. I want to kick off the event with a story about probably the most unusual workplace that you've heard of. It's going to be a story about a company that has no managers whatsoever. It's going to be a story about Lunar Logic, where I work. So just a few words about me. My name, as you already know, is Pawel Brodzinski. And my role is kind of a CEO at Lunar Logic. And the keyword here is kind of. Because the pure reason why we even have a CEO is a legal requirement. You cannot operate a company in Poland unless it has a CEO. So that's why. Lunar Logic is a web development agency in Krakow. And if you end up liking my story, what I'm going to share with you for the next 60 minutes, and you would like to get a sense how it feels to work with such an organization, well, you can always hire us. We are always looking for more interesting projects. So there is an option to do that. I also run a blog, which you can find at brodzinski.com, and I share there lots of things that interest me professionally. So there will be stuff around lean and agile, but there will be also a lot of stuff around organizational design, which is a fancy name to label what I'm going to talk about today. And you can also find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Pawel Brodzinski. And if you end up liking or not liking anything that I share, or you would like to add something, or have a remark or a comment, I would be really, really happy to talk to you afterwards. You can just approach me or leave something on Twitter, whatever. I love feedback. So let me start with a story. And it's going to be pretty much a story of my career. So it's 2001, and I end up, by accident, in my first management role in my career, and I end up liking it. So I think that, that's something that I want to build my career around. It's 2004, and for the first time, I'm in a role of senior manager. And by that time, my leadership style is already established. I'm not this kind of, a manager from a corner office who manages their team through sending edicts. I like to be really close with my team. I lead in a very informal way. And I always hope that whatever the goal for me and for the team is, I will be able to ignite and sustain that fire in my team members, so that we will, as a group, as a team, we will pursue that goal together. And yet, reality is not so. So what I see instead is people coming and people going. People joining me for the journey for some time and then, getting disengaged, moving on. And I see that over and over again. It's 2007, and my best friend leaves my team. And it's a real bummer because I spent my whole professional career working with him on the same team, in different setups. So he was my rock. And yet, I wasn't able to sustain that fire, to sustain engagement even with him. It's 2010, my mentor leaves. The guy who kept dragging me with him along throughout 3 different companies. I perceived myself as his sidekick for quite some time. And then it's the same story again. He gets disengaged, he finds something more interesting to pursue, and he moves on. By that time, I perceive my management role as a really lonely gig. I mean, don't get me wrong, I cherish the power, I fancy the influence that I have over the organizations or part of organizations that I lead. It's all fine, but at the same time, I feel like I'm really alone in the job. By 2011, I realized that I developed that 6th sense. Whenever someone drops by and they're like, hey, Pawel, do you have a few minutes to talk? I always know when they want to talk about leaving the company. Literally, always. I don't know what that is. It's in the way they talk or why they approach me at any given moment. But I have that 6th sense that I know. It's like, oh, shit, again. So it's 2012. I joined Lunar Logic, and on many accounts, Lunar Logic is a dream job for me. This is a company that has a lot of things set right. So I don't need to work on the basics. I think that, like my vision for the company would be to bring it to the next level. And obviously, one of the first things that I do in my new role as a new CEO in Helm, I gather everyone in a room, and I share my vision for the company with everyone. And my vision for the company, the big part of it, is I want Lunar Logic to be the best workplace to work at in Krakow. And this is a fairly bold dream, because Krakow is the second biggest city in Poland, almost 1 million people living there, very vibrant IT community. We have offices of companies like Google. So this is a pretty ambitious goal, and I think that this is something that people would subscribe to. People would love to join me on that journey. It's 12 months later. I'm in the very same room. I'm running a presentation summarizing my first year at Lunar. And one of the slides says it all. Over the past 12 months, I've lost more than 60% of my crew. They didn't buy into my dream. I wasn't able to even ignite that fire in them. So even my job as a manager felt lonely. Now, loneliness is the paramount. And yet, I'm not a quitter. I keep dreaming my dream. I keep dreaming of a workplace that allows us to fulfill our potential, that allows us to keep ourselves engaged, and that gives us option to pursue our personal dreams even when they change over the lifetime, because they do change. And if you wanted to summarize that story, you could say that this is a story about disengagement. Lots of people in that story got disengaged and decided to do something about it, which pretty much in all cases meant they moved on. And I would say that this is a really common issue. In fact, in 2013, Gallup ran a global poll on the state of the workforce, and one of the key findings was that only 13% of employees worldwide are engaged. 13. It means that the rest, 87% of employees, are either disengaged, they don't give a damn, or actively disengaged. They are actively harming their workplaces. Nice music. Sorry. So this is the issue that we are looking at, and it's really bad. And if this is an issue and we are looking for answers, we will obviously find some. So this is Daniel Pink. In his book Drive, Dan Pink points 3 traits that any work environment needs to have in order to keep people motivated. First of all, autonomy, being able to make decisions, all the decisions relevant to our work. Mastery, being able to do our best every day. And purpose, having a common goal with others that we work with others in our team, with others in our organization. We remove one of those, we remove conditions for high motivation in the long run. Now, when I look at that list, I say that there is one thing that is a real problem here, and it's autonomy. So let me start from the bottom. Purpose. Purpose is very individual for organizations. So there are organizations that are purposeful, and there are organizations that are purposeless. So think of like the first group, think of Elon Musk's companies, SpaceX, Tesla. They do have a goal. They want to change the world. The latter group, companies that if you ask them about their purpose, they will be like, oh, making more money. Doesn't count as a purpose, really. But there are lots of companies like that. However, the thing is that this is very individual from company to company. You can find purposeful companies out there. Then mastery. So I have a hypothesis on mastery. And it goes like that. If you have all the autonomy you need to make all the relevant decisions regarding your work, including how you work, you can also work according to the quality standards that you desire. You can pursue mastery. If you have enough autonomy, mastery is not a problem. Doesn't work the other way around, however. So you can be allowed to do a quality job, but at the same time, you may be forced to ask for permission over and over and over and over and over again. This means that you don't have autonomy. So if we solve a problem of autonomy, we probably kill two birds with one stone. However, if we want more and more autonomy, we cannot just simply say that, oh, let's allow people to make all the decisions about how they are working, because it would likely end up with anarchy and chaos, because everyone would be like making random decisions about their work. Unless we provide some structure, some constraints in our process to enable autonomy, well, we're not going to make that happen, or not in a wise way. And also, it doesn't happen overnight. This is not a change that we can pull all at once. So the rest of the presentations is the story of how we did that at Lunar Logic, how we distributed autonomy across the board with everyone at the company, and we didn't turn the company into complete chaos. So, the starting point. When I joined the company in 2012, the company was all about technical excellence, and not only technical excellence. We were also very lean and agile, so we were all about craftsmanship, all in the way how we wrote code, but also in a way how we managed work. The company was somewhat flat. We didn't really have a management structure. However, there was this informal hierarchy. So there were people who had more positional power than others, and everyone knew who those people were. So there was kind of informal hierarchy. The company was pretty transparent. One of the pleasant surprises for me when I joined the company was that each month the company published its financial reports to all the employees. Well, fine. A few companies that do that. But not everything was transparent. So there were some secrets. And then, most importantly, the company was led by a very strong, charismatic CEO who was calling almost all the shots. So these were the shoes that I was in when I joined the company. And actually, this is a very comfortable situation for a manager. I mean, everyone listens to me because this is the part of organizational culture. And given that I'm a CEO, I can make all the decisions. Pretty comfortable situation for a manager. Now, before I will continue the story, there is one remark that I want to make, that there is no single path toward the end goal that I'm going to share with you. So this is Richard Sheridan from Menlo. So his story is Menlo on many accounts is very similar to Lunar Logic, but Richard Sheridan's story is very different than mine. So Richard Sheridan was promoted to a vice president position in a big company in US. And what he realized that all he wanted was to quit the industry and start a canoe camp in a remote place somewhere in US, because he's had enough. He had this epiphany that he doesn't want to work like that anymore. And this is why he started Menlo, that was built around very different principles. In our case, there was no epiphany. There was no single moment when we were like, oh, we want to be a very different company. It was basically thinking of what's the next step? What can we improve? So it was a long path of small changes that we went through over the course of a few years. And the first step on that path was introducing more transparency. So when I joined the company, my rule of thumb was that more transparency is better than less transparency. Well, right now, I would argue with my younger self, and I would say that, well, there are edge cases where it doesn't work like that. But back then, I'm like, more transparency is better. So the attitude that I adopted was that whenever someone would ask me a question, any question, I would answer that question openly and honestly. And then I realized that, oh, I started sharing secrets with people. So like someone would ask me, Pavel, what are our rates for that client? I would answer that question, and by the reaction, I would realize, oh, you didn't know, did you? And then it would trigger follow-up discussions, like, so one of our engineers would say, oh, so our rates are like that, and my salary is like that, so there is a huge gap. Where does it go? So we would have a meaningful discussion about the managing the company, which was nice. So I hope that like more transparency would trigger better understanding of the business and better everyday decisions in people. And it worked like that just a little bit. Because you don't change people's behaviors simply by making information available. So just throwing information at you doesn't really change how you behave, because there are two more things that we need to take care of. First of all, information needs to be understandable. You need to be able to understand what the information I'm sharing with you. So I can throw at you all the financial numbers of running Lunar, like from Lunar Logic, and you wouldn't understand a thing, because you wouldn't be able to say which one of those numbers is signal and which one is noise. So information needs to be understandable. But more importantly, you need to be able to act on the information. And there is a nice story to picture that. It was still before I joined the company. The company made a decision to buy a fancy chair for one of senior developers. And there is Tomek, who is an intern back then. And Tomek is looking at that decision, and he realizes that the chair that was bought cost 4 times his monthly salary. How does he feel? I mean, it's transparency. He should feel, well, he got information. He's frustrated, obviously. Because what he realizes is that he can do literally nothing about that. So what we need to do, along with transparency, we need to provide a way for people to act on that transparency, which means that we need autonomy. And this is a very important thing. Transparency and autonomy always go head to head as a pair. If we move a bar on one account, we should move the bar on the other as well. Because transparency without autonomy may trigger frustration. Autonomy without transparency will mean that people are making random decisions because they don't have relevant information. And this is exactly what Don Reinertsen points us to when he's talking about decentralizing control. Don Reinertsen says that to decentralize control, we need to give people authority to make decisions, and we need to provide information relevant to make those decisions right. Interestingly enough, Don Reinertsen here uses a word authority while I'm using the word autonomy. And there is a very important difference. So authority is all about formal power to make a decision. Autonomy is about courage to use that power to make a decision, sometimes even without formal power. So let me give you an example. We have a dinner tonight. I hope we'll be having beers, because I'm a beer lover. So I can give you formal authority to pick a brand of beer that I'm drinking tonight. You decide what kind of beer I drink. But if at the same time I insatiate fear or pressure, so that instead of making the decision, you would come here and ask, you know, Pawel, what brand of beer you like most? I would like, you know, would do. And then you would go with my answer. You have authority, but you don't have autonomy. You didn't use authority to make a decision. You just went with whatever I told you. So authority without autonomy is possible. Autonomy without authority is possible as well. It's when you are working in an environment that has this attitude, it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. I used to do that. I ended up being fired. But it's possible. So autonomy, not authority. And in fact, Don Reinertsen, when we listen to him further on, he says that. So when he points requirements to decentralized control, he says about authority and information. But when he says about enabling decision-making in lower organizational levels, he says authority, formal power to make decisions, information, we already established that, and he says practice. We need to let people practice, and this is a part worth stressing, which means that people would occasionally fail, aka make mistakes, make bad decisions. We need to let that happen. Otherwise, we won't enable people down there to make decisions. And I'm all about decision-making because this is the ultimate application of formal power in modern workplace. I mean, this is what managers do. Managers make decisions. So this is what shows where real power is in a modern workplace. And the problem with that is that we have this prevailing management paradigm that is present almost everywhere, in almost every workplace. And this is a paradigm of hierarchical power distribution structure. So think of how your organizations are designed, are structured. So there is a CEO up there who can make all the decisions about the company. And then, when the company grows from the very beginning, eventually a CEO, a single person, doesn't scale up so they can make all the decisions. So they hire a layer of managers below, and they distribute just a little bit of power to each of those managers. And then the company grows further, and each of those managers realize that they are not capable of making all the decisions because they are only a single person. So they hire a layer of managers below, and they distribute a little bit of power to each of those managers. And this is how the hierarchy grows, and this means that in each layer of this hierarchy, there is some sort of power, kinds of decisions that those people, those managers would make. Now, this structure is not so popular without a reason. I mean, this structure solves at least two common problems with decision making. First of all, the problem of indecisiveness. So given that we have this clear structure and we always know who is supposed to make any decision, we always know who we should ask for that decision. If I'm a developer and I want a raise, my boss will tell me whether I can get it or not, or my boss's boss, whatever the organization is. I always know where I should go. And then the second problem that we address with the hierarchical structure is the problem of accountability. So given that we know who is supposed to make a decision, we also know who should be kept accountable for making that decision, or not making it for that matter. So it's easy, like looking from the top, it's easy to say where the blame should be distributed, which is in more dysfunctional organizations, or accountability in less dysfunctional organizations. The problem is, though, that exactly the same structure is the exact reason why we have so little autonomy in our workplaces. Because we are incentivized not to distribute too much power down there. And let me explain you how it works. So look at me and imagine I am still a line manager, a role that I fulfilled for quite a few years. So I'm a line manager and I have a team. And I have a few decisions that I can make. This is my power. And I can do those decisions myself, which is what most managers do, or I can think, oh, I will let my people to make those decisions. But then, inevitably, it will happen that my people would make a decision that I disagree with. And now, I have two options, both are bad. So first of all, I can just pass that decision. And if I'm lucky, it was a good decision, nothing would happen. If I'm unlucky, that decision turns out to be bad, and then I will be kept accountable for that decision. My butt will hurt. And you know what? My butt will hurt because of something that I didn't even do, because it was like my people, not me. So I'm actually incentivized to pick the other option, which is, oh no, I disagree with this, and I will use my better judgment and I will change that decision. I will double guess that decision. In this case, if my butt ends up hurting, it will be at least my fault. So I shouldn't complain. The problem is that through that action, I disabled autonomy that I given to my people. And in fact, we are not even back to the square one. It's even worse, because now they got burned and they know that they won't try it again because it was a fake. It was a lie. So, in fact, I'm incentivized not to even try such a scenario. I'm incentivized to keep all the power for myself. And this is why we have so low levels of autonomy in our workplace. So what can we do about that? Well, first of all, we need to realize we have a problem. It's like, oh, hi, I'm Pawel, and I do have a problem. And then there are simple steps that we can start with. This was my approach at Lunar Logic. I adopted the strategy of taking a step back. So whenever someone would pop up at my desk and they would be like, oh, Pawel, can I do this or that? Can we do this or that? I would, in simple situations, I would refuse to make that decision. I would take a step back and I would create this vacuum for decision making so that someone can step in and make that call instead of me. And I did that through two very simple answers that I was giving people, and both of those answers became memes at Lunar. So people will laugh at me because of those answers, but I will share them anyway. So first answer was, there is no simple answer to such a question. So someone would approach me, and a developer would approach me, and they would be like, hey, Pawel, I was talking to those guys, they're awesome, they're organizing this event, and the event is great, and they asked me about sponsorships. Can Lunar sponsor them? So instead of giving them yes or no answer, or yes or no an explanation kind of answer, I would say, well, there's no simple answer to such a question. And then I would say, so you know what, if we decide to sponsor that event, so this is our cost, what would be the value? What we are getting for that? Like, let's talk. And by the way, how much valuable are the things that we are getting? And oh, by the way, if we spend that money on sponsoring that event, we are not spending that money on all sorts of other things that we could have spent it on. And oh, spending that money influences the whole financial situation of the company, which looks like this. And oh, if we decide on the sponsorship of an event, it will influence all the future decisions about sponsoring different events. So instead of giving them a yes or no answer, 2 seconds, or yes or no an explanation kind of answer, 2 minutes, I would give them half-an-hour lecture about, you know, like the bigger context of the company finances. So it was quite of an effort, and I might have sounded boring, but my hopes were that people would start seeing more and making those decisions better, and then I would leave them with that decision. I mean, my take would be, well, let's not sponsor that event this time, but you can pick the option that you prefer. The other question that I was giving was when someone would approach me and they would be, hey, Pawel, can I? And I would interrupt them right there, and I would be like, well, can you? I wouldn't even know what they wanted to ask me about. It would be like, oh, ball in your court. Tell me, can you? How do you think? And obviously they would tell me what they wanted because they didn't feel so courageous. But eventually they realized that I actually don't want to make all of those decisions. And for the first time, I don't remember who that was, but the situation happened, like it was like, hey, Pawel, can I? And I was like, well, can you? And then whoever that was, they would just look at me. They would say yes. Turn away and go to their desk. I was like, I don't know what's happening, but I'm happy. The problem with that strategy is that it travels only that far. So you can adopt that strategy only in the context of individual decisions. So as long as a decision is simple and affects only a single person, you can adopt that strategy. But when you are talking about decisions that would affect the whole team or the whole company. So we're talking, for example, about setting a new policy. You cannot really do that because you want to consult with everyone. So when we face this kind of decision, we started experimenting with consensus-driven decision-making. And if you want to listen to half-an-hour long rant why consensus-driven decision-making in professional context is a really bad idea, just approach me anytime. I have a really, really long hate speech about that. But before I knew that, we tried that anyway. And in fact, we call a time when we were trying consensus-driven decision-making at Lunar, we dub it a shitstorm era. Because every discussion was turned into long, fruitless, emotionally taxing shitstorm that provided no outcomes whatsoever. And after one of those, that included slamming doors and literally tears, we realized that we cannot do that anymore. And then we got some inspiration about how we can do that differently. And we ended up with designing, mostly stealing, but let's call it designing, a decision-making process that has a really fancy name. We call it a decision-making process. And the decision-making process is really simple. So when we started, it was like within given constraints, and the constraints were all about financial outcomes of the decision. So we would go, as long as the decision doesn't cost the company more than €1,000, I don't know how much it is in kroner. Anyway, €1,000, anyone can make any decision as long as they consult two groups of people. People who have expertise on the topic, and people who will be affected by the decision. Once once the decision maker heard all the feedback, they make autonomously their decision, and they don't need to involve all the feedback that they got. They can go against some people, or even majority of people. And they make their decision. And the decision has to be made transparent afterwards. That's it. So how would it work? So let's say I want to go for a booster conference, and let's assume that the round trip is below the financial limit. So I need to consult people who have expertise on the topic. So, well, who has expertise on the quality of booster conference? Well, Pawel was here a few years ago, so let's ask Pawel. Then who would be affected? Well, my team would be affected because I will disappear for a few days, and my client will be affected because I will disappear for a few days. So I discuss that with them. So I listen to all the feedback, and I make the decision, oh, sounds awesome, I'm going. And I can make that decision even though one of my peers would say, you know what, you should consider that other conference that is closer to Krakow, and so the round trip would be cheaper. And I can go against that kind of advice. That's it. So we started playing with decision-making in kind of safe context. I mean, how much harm you can do when you are talking about spending €1,000. But then what we realized that we were getting better and better at it, and quickly, so we started raising the bar. So we started raising the limit to which you could make any decision. And then there is one anecdote how it works. So there is Gosia, one of our graphic designers, and she pops up at my desk and she's like, hey, Pawel, I want to buy a new computer. And she's a graphic designer, so she wants to buy one of those fancy Macs or whatever. I'm like, why would you ask me? I mean, we have a decision-making process. And she's like, yeah, but the limit right now is like €2,000 and the computer costs 2,500. So this is why I'm asking you. I was like, wait a second. So I open a wiki page where we have our decision-making process described, and I change the limit from €2,000 to €3,000, and I say, done. Now you can make the decision yourself. And I realized by doing that actually limit was not needed anymore, and we quickly removed it altogether. So right now, anyone can make any decision as long as they go through what we call advisory process. That's it. No constraints whatsoever. So this was how we scaled up decision-making process. And in fact, we started looking at decision-making process as kind of ultimate a decision-making pattern that we adopt. So even when we are talking about things that don't have financial consequences, like let's adopt a new pattern or a new rule or a new policy, we are using the same discussion process like here. And the reason is, and there is an interesting dynamics to those kinds of decisions. So if I want to introduce a new policy, I cannot just enforce it on everyone, because I can autonomously make a decision that from today, everyone works in pairs. And then someone disagrees, and tomorrow they change my decision. And we can go on and on and on. So instead of enforcing a policy on people, I need to get buy-in. And it doesn't have to be buy-in like, oh, Pawel, I love this decision, awesome, let's go for that. But it has to be at least, I don't really like it, but let's try it for a week or two. So this is how far you need to go to try something. And introducing decision-making process was one of pivotal changes on our path toward the company with no managers. The other pivotal change was introducing transparent salaries. So when I started working with Lunar, salaries was secret, which is still very, very common out there. And what I realized is that we got really good in making decisions that have financial consequences using decision-making process. But we need to address the elephant in the room. We are a professional services organization. As pretty much every professional services organization out there, around 80% of all our costs are directly related to labor cost. So we can be as good as we want with spending money, but unless we are actually managing salaries, we are just managing 1/5 at best of the company. So I expressed that intention, that I want salaries at Lunar to be transparent. Like 2/3 of the company hated me because of that idea. But the long story short, 10 months later, we are giving it a go. We are starting with open salaries. And the one important observation about making salaries transparent is that, remember what I told you at the beginning about transparency and autonomy? They have to go head to head. Simply pinning a payroll to the wall won't do the trick. What you need to do is you need to give people information and give people option to act on that information. Give them some autonomy, at least some autonomy to influence what is on that payroll. And this was the hard part. So we ended up designing what we call a salary process. And salary process is pretty much an adoption of decision-making process. And salary process is very, very simple, as decision-making process is. So initially it was anyone can propose a raise for anyone else, including themselves, by the way. And it triggers the discussion. So I can propose a raise for anyone, and obviously I need to tell like what kind of a raise, why, and I need to provide an argument. And then everyone is invited, because like payroll affects everyone is invited to share their opinion. No one is forced though. Everyone is invited to share an opinion. So people share an opinion, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. People give the person in discussion feedback, a lot of feedback. And then initially, it was me who was making a final call. So it was kind of safety mechanism for me. It's like, oh, we won't go crazy with payroll. I will be making final decisions. But I made a very important commitment to myself. I don't think I made it transparent to everyone, but I made a strong commitment to myself. And that commitment was that whenever the outcome of the collective discussion would be against my judgment, I would go with the outcome of collective discussion. I would go against my better judgment, even if I will be convinced that we are making a serious mistake. And the reason was that my justification of that approach was that I believed, and it proved to be true, I believed that we will survive any mistakes that we can make, but we need to learn real autonomy. So people need to feel that they actually can influence the payroll, even though I disagree with their opinion. And actually, we made some serious mistakes. So the best story I have on that is over the course of 3 months, 90 days, we've given one of our engineers a raise, and then we fired them. And there was collective agreement on both decisions. So one of those decisions were utterly wrong, and I have my opinion about those. The thing is that this was the cost of learning. This was the cost of learning how we are making serious decisions. And open salaries, as the whole system, both transparent salaries and autonomy in setting salaries, proved to be extremely good exercise in autonomous decision making. It touches the very sensitive area of salaries. So it helped us to be very respectful and very thoughtful when we are making the decisions. And we learned really, really quickly because of those mistakes that we were making. And actually, soon enough, we changed our salary process just a little bit. So right now, it's not me who is making the final decision. It's whoever started a discussion. So what you can do right now at Lunar, you can start a raised thread for yourself, and you're a decision maker at the end of that thread. And oh, by the way, you can go against opinions that you've heard. That's perfectly valid. You can totally do that. Now, once we have had that done, we pretty much had all the important everyday management tasks distributed to everyone. But I realized that there was something that we needed to address too, and it was the company strategy. So the history of Lunar Logic strategy is also a nice anecdote. So when I joined the company was going through some financial troubles. So instead of like setting a real strategic goal for the company, I basically set a proxy goal, which was like, let's reach a point of financial stability. And we reached that point soon enough, like it was a year and a half after. And then people would expect that, so we will have a new strategy. But I refused to set it. So my idea was that, something would emerge. If there is this vacuum, the strategy would emerge. So I waited and waited and waited and waited and waited, and nothing emerged. And I decided that, well, one thing I can do is I can do more of what didn't work, wait more, or I can find another way. So I decided that I don't want to set a strategy myself, even though I could do it, but I want us to do that collectively. So I organized a series of workshops around setting a strategic goal. But you don't start a workshop with everyone at the company and you don't ask questions like, oh, what do you think the company strategy should be? And what do you think the company strategy should be? Because people have no clue. They don't think in such terms. So instead of doing that, we started asking questions like, imagine that it's 2 years from now and you are still with the company. Why? Or what kind of behaviors you would like to see at the office every day? So we've had like lots and lots of ideas of things that were desirable by people. And then we started converging around those, and then we started clustering those, and then we started labeling those. So we eventually ended up with a series of distinct strategies that we could pursue, and ended up with a short list of 6 of those. And then we picked basically which one was the most desirable collectively. So, and this is why we are right now on a path from purely a company that provides software development services, so like builders, toward product consultants. Right now we are helping our clients more and more in defining the product, in helping their products to succeed, not only through building them, but also helping them to shape those products in a wiser way. So what we did is what Frederick Laloux, in his book Reinventing Organizations, calls emergent purpose. Emergent purpose is basically a sum of individual purposes of everyone at the organization. So every single person working anywhere has their personal goals. And emergent purpose is basically the outcome of the collective of those individual purposes. And what you could do is you arguably should do is you can listen to that emergent purpose. Because if you know what that emergent purpose is, when you are setting a strategy for the company, the more aligned one is with the other, the more you would keep people engaged. Because if the goal of the company is this, and your goal is that, you would get disengaged very quickly and you would leave, move on. So the more of alignment between the emergent purpose and the strategy of the company, the better engagement level. And in fact, we did even better. We listened to emergent purpose, and we called it our company strategy. So this is what we did. And this adds the third piece to a jigsaw of a company with no measures. So we already had autonomy and transparency, increasing level of both. And right now we add alignment. Because we have autonomy and transparency. We can give people autonomy and transparency, and they would be pulling the company all sorts of different directions. So we wouldn't be able to bring the company to the next level. So once we have alignment, we have effort of people aligned somehow. So it's much easier. Everyone is rowing in the same direction. So this is why alignment is also important. Now, once we had that done, there was still one thing that I knew of. There was still my prerogative as a CEO, and I was procrastinating, like doing something with that as long as I could, and it was about firing people. I was procrastinating with changing that because if setting someone's salary is a sensitive thing, letting someone go is an order of magnitude more sensitive. And if you can find, if you're looking in the internet, you can find lots of inspiration how to make decisions, how to make salaries transparent, how to give people raises. There are all sorts of options. You can get inspiration around that. We're looking how companies deal with firing people, and with a single exception of companies that have appraisal processes, which we don't have, because I said over my dead body. There is nothing, literally nothing. So we had to invent something on that account. And what we did was yet another adoption of decision-making process, actually salary process. So it goes like that. If you think that someone is really underperforming, you need to give them feedback. And actually, there are 2 rounds of feedback. Only in the second round, you can give a formal yellow card. This is kind of formal warning. Unless something is fixed, I will start a letting go process. So there is, first of all, there is a part about feedback. So there is no surprises when you are letting go. And then, if nothing happens, anyone, like that person who went through that feedback, can start a letting go process. And letting go process is basically a salary process, except the decision is not to give someone a raise, but to let them go. And then the decision maker is whoever started the discussion. And once we had that officially announced, it's been done. In less than 4 years, I distributed all the authority and all the autonomy that I had as CEO of Lunar Logic to everyone at Lunar. So there is no difference in power that I have right now between me and an intern that we hired 2 months ago. In fact, that intern may right now be starting a letting go process for me. They can be firing me right now. And it's not only about formal authority, but it's also about autonomy, which means that people are using the power that they have. And by the way, this exact tweet brought me to that stage. After that tweet, I was invited to Booster Conference. And introducing letting go process was the very final touch of removing all management structure at Lunar. So this was the last management thing that we had. But actually, there are a few things that I want to mention as well that happened over somewhere in the middle of that story that I think were important. First of all, and we did that very early in the process, we discarded all the formal positions. So 4 years ago at Lunar, there was a formal senior engineer position. So you could have be a developer or a senior developer, a designer or a senior designer. And the thing was that I started hearing stories. It's like, oh, you know, Adam should have been a senior developer, but he's not. Oh, Bartek shouldn't have been a senior developer, but he is. So instead of solving all those individual cases, I was like, let's scrap all that crap. We are removing positions altogether. There is not going to be any formal position at all. But hey, people have positions. People need to put something in LinkedIn or whatever. So I said, there's going to be only one rule you have to follow when you are choosing your position. You can choose whatever you want as long as you follow that rule. And that rule is your position can be whatever the hell you want. Because what's the worst thing that can happen? If you aim too high, people would laugh at you. I'm like, senior developer, my ass. And actually, what this decision triggered was some of our most experienced people, like Tomek here, are picking something very, very humble, web engineer. Another thing that we were doing, or actually I was doing, was downplaying my role as a CEO. So I joined the company as a CEO. I could pick a corner office. I refused to do so. I joined one of the rooms with people. In fact, we turned the corner office, the most fancy office at the most fancy room at the office, into a meeting room, so everyone could use it. I didn't even choose a regular desk. I was sitting on a beanbag with a laptop table, because then I was lower than everyone else, like physically lower. So whenever someone was approaching me, they were looking down at me and not up. Well, with my height, it would be hard to look up at me anyway. But the thing is that instead of creating this space, like you think of CEOs that you know, like huge desk, there is distance between you and a petitioner who comes to you. So I removed that. I scrapped all the attributes of management that I could think of. I wanted to show that, managers are not here. Like, in my heart, I'm not a manager. I'm helping you. And actually, it was easy because it went through my inspiration. But in a bigger company, if you try to do that, you may want or need to do that in a more systemic way, like actually taking back the attributes of management from the managers. The third thing that we do, and this is an important thing, we started designing teams around roles and not positions. So there's a short explanation that this picture begs. This is my son Wojtek, and one of the reasons why to speak publicly is that I can show pictures of my son in public. Here it goes. So this is my son Wojtek, and it may be a surprise for you, but his position is not to be a space rocket. It was his role at a party in the kindergarten. And then his role was something else, I guess, being Lightning McQueen or something like that. And then he was just a kid. And we do the same thing in our personal lives. I'm a dad, I'm a son. I'm a peer, I'm a friend. I fulfill all those roles all the time, and I switch between those contextually. So why the hell do we have those formal positions? I'm a project manager, so I will be doing project management tasks, and that's it. So we used to have someone that was called a Scrum Master / project manager, because now we are very lightweight in the way we work. But anyway, there are some project management-ish tasks that we need to fulfill. So instead of having a project manager, right now we have a role. Someone needs to take care of that task. And different people would step in. Sometimes it will be a developer, sometimes it will be a tester, sometimes it will be a graphic designer, sometimes it will be me. And that's all fine. We are fulfilling that role very contextually. And it also helps people to think of themselves in a very different way. Instead of thinking of themselves, I'm a developer, I write code, they think, oh, what we need to take care of today so that we push the project forward. Oh, I need to test. Well, so be it. I don't love testing, but if that helps, I will. And this change also triggered another change that is a really, really nice outcome of the whole transition, which is a very different style of leadership. So right now, when we are starting a new project, we're not saying, oh, you are going to be a team lead and you are going to be a tech lead. No. We don't call anyone a leader, because people would step into the leadership role contextually. And by the way, if, like looking from the top, if you think about a team, you would like a different person to lead the effort when you are solving a complex technical issue. Then you would like to lead the team when you are having a tough conversation with a client. Then you would like to lead the team when you are addressing a problem with an underperformer. Because in the first case, it will be all about technical expertise. In the second, it will be about communication skills. And in the third, about empathy. I don't think I know a single person who excels at all three. So we need different kinds of leaders, depending on the context, depending on the situation. And if you don't create this fixed scenario, you don't put people in boxes, they would act as leaders. So what I keep saying is that we don't have problem with leadership at Lunar, because pretty much everyone is a leader in this context or another. So this is basically our story of going from one management paradigm to the other. The old management paradigm is all about hierarchical structure, about distributing power in a top-down manner. The new paradigm is all about autonomy. The first paradigm defines people through a position in the hierarchy they are in. Either formal hierarchy or informal hierarchy, by the way. We didn't have much of formal one. We did have quite a lot of informal one. The new paradigm promotes action, promotes initiative over formal position. It doesn't really matter that you are out of internships. If you have valuable contributions to offer, go for it. And it's not about, that transition is not about going from a formal model to informal model. In fact, even though our approach is very, very informal, we have very few rules. In fact, during that presentations, you probably heard all the rules that we have at Lunar Logic. I cannot think about anything else that I would add to the list. So the change isn't, even though we are informal, the change isn't about going from formal model to informal model. In fact, there are autonomy-based models that are extremely formal, like holacracy. Holacracy that has all the definitions about the constraints, how you change those constraints. For heaven's sake, they do have a constitution. So it's extremely formal. And yet, what holacracy does, it defines constraints, it defines rules, how to change those constraints. But within those, what they call circles, people who have responsibilities, they have full autonomy. So this is an approach also based on autonomy, even though it's very formal. In our case, we are extremely informal, and this is why organizational culture for us is a paramount. The reason is, in holacracy, if someone wants to use autonomy in an evil way, they have all those constraints that prevents them from doing so. So you have all of the autonomy, but you are constrained to the circle. In our case, there is nothing of that. We don't have a thick book of rules. The only thing we have is organizational culture. So if someone wants to do an evil thing using the autonomy they get, the only mechanism that would prevent them from doing so is peer pressure. So people would stand up and say, hey, we're not doing such things right here. Well, you can still do that, but given enough peer pressure, you would probably stop. And peer pressure is fueled by organizational culture, because what organizational culture is a sum of behaviors of everyone in an organization, but it also depends on what drives those behaviors. Shared norms, shared visions, values, principles. So if you see someone drinking a beer during a lunch, whether you would react or not depends on whether that behavior is perceived acceptable or not by a group. I mean, you can think that it's wrong to drink a beer at work, but if that's a behavior that's acceptable in this very organization, you won't react because it's acceptable. And whether something is acceptable or not is the simple outcome of organizational culture. So 4 years later, what has changed and what has not? We are still an organization that is all about technical leadership, and it's lean and agile. This hasn't changed. There were things that changed a little bit, and these are, right now we are a truly flat organization, not somewhat flat organization. We are extremely transparent and not somewhat transparent. In a way, we basically covered the last mile on those accounts. And there is a follow-up observation to that. Covering the last mile is the hardest thing to do. So it's easy to make things transparent that are not relevant. It's hard when they are sensitive. But the real change that happened was about management structure. Right now, no managers whatsoever. Everyone has equal power. And we have a very new and different kind of leadership. So everyone, when we are giving ourselves feedback, there's sometimes what you would hear is that someone is perceived as a company leader, which is the top informal title that you could have at Lunar right now. In a way, this is saying, oh, we saw your contribution to lead the company. And oh, by the way, during those 4 years, we also changed the logo. I don't know whether it helped or not, but just in case, you may want to do it if you're going through such a transition. So the story is all nice, and I hope inspiring, but the question you should be asking me right now is like, hey, Pawel, but why should we care? I mean, like, show us why it's better, besides, like you feel better, or act as you felt better. So first of all, the cost. If you're looking at the stories from a company that went through a similar path to us, consistently you would see reports that between 10 to 20% of people leave because of the transformation. It's not that this is all people you lost and not more. We did lose more. But around that many people quoted the transformation as one of the reasons of them leaving. So some people just prefer to be told what to do. Some people just want to focus on, I don't know, development, design, and then they don't want to be involved in leading the company in any way. And they prefer an environment that gives them that. It's not for everyone. The good thing is, though, that it's for vast majority. Vast majority of people feel themselves better in such an organization. Now, the gains. So I was thinking about financial parameters I want to show you, and I decided to go with financial stability. Why? Because this is one of our shared values. So we are not about optimizing profit. When we were talking about like what kind of values we share, we ended up that stability is more, in the long run, is more important than optimizing profits in the short run. So these are two curves that show financial stability. The blue line is our cash buffer, which we call a safety fund. Safety fund is basically money that we stash on our bank account that would allow the company to go for some time, given no income whatsoever. And we count that in months. So the more costly the company is, the more money we need to have to sustain the company for 6 months. And right now the safety fund is 6 months, and it was going steadily up. Right now it's going to flatten out because we don't think we should have any more than 6 months. The other curve, the red curve, is what we call overflow money. So once we have everything covered at the end of the year, we spend all the rest of the money on profit sharing, which we share equally with everyone, with every employee, and dividend, which we share with owners of the company. And overflow money is, again, going steadily up. Now, another parameter that I want to show you is about team stability, not financial stability, but team stability. So the red line is the size of the company. It's fairly stable. And the blue, the important line here is the blue one, it is retention. And with the single exception of year 2014, which is an edge case because it is a year after I lost 60%, more than 60% of the team, so it was kind of an oddball. The retention curve is steadily going up. And it's not only about the numbers, it's also about the feeling that I have, or like anyone has, when they are popping up at the office. What you basically see is you feel that you are surrounded by more and more of veterans, which feels good. And this is probably the most important one, and this goes back to the very first thing that I told you about, the engagement thing, or disengagement thing. This is perceived engagement 4 years ago and now. So I asked all the people who remember 4 years ago and like are with us still now, and I asked them about perceived engagement level of the whole company back then and right now. And the red dot is the average, the orange line is the range of answers. It's not only that engagement level went up almost twice as much, but also those ranges, they don't even overlap. This is how much better it is. But these are only numbers. So if you ask me why it was worth a try, I would say that when I come to the office, I see a workplace where we can pursue our dreams, pursue our goals, not through leaving the company at the first sign of misalignment with its goals, but through changing and adjusting the company so it suits better our personal dreams. And I think that dream of such a workplace, is not only a dream of myself, but it's also a dream of many of you here and many of people out there. And it's also the answer for a plague of modern workplace, which is low level of engagement. Thank you very much. I was told that I may leave some time for answers, but you know, it's Norway, so don't expect any. I don't know if we have time. If not, I'm really happy to have conversations with you in any context that is familiar with you. I have a question.
Actually, I wanted to ask you about three things. And the first thing is, who owns the company?
Okay, so the first question, who owns the company?
I ask all three. Who owns the company and how many employees you have? And the last thing is, do you think those questions are relevant for the organization?
3 questions. Who owns the company, how many people in the company, and whether those questions are relevant to the context. Who owns the company? Right now the company is owned by Pawel, so he's almost he owns almost the whole of the company, but this year we introduced employee shares program, so we are going to distribute huge part of, over years, we are going to distribute huge part of the company to employees. How big the company is, 25-ish. And it was through conscious decisions of ours. We had we made an explicit decision that we don't want to grow, and we made that decision collectively. But recently we've changed that decision. Right now we do want to grow. And the question is whether those questions are relevant. The question about the ownership is not. The question about the size is, because with significantly bigger size, it would be difficult to go with very informal model that we did. You would need to go, the bigger the company is, probably the more rules you would need to have to go through that path. But there are options in all sorts of sizes. So there are reports of the companies as big as 30,000 people going for a journey for more autonomy. And they did that. So there are tools for all sizes of the company. This very extremely informal path probably has its limit in size.
That's all the time we have for questions.
That's all the time that we had for questions. So I would be really happy to talk to you. I'm here till Thursday night. Thank you.